gotta be one of the top in the class.
No, I wasn't. You know what? And I never wanted to be an astronaut or go to the moon. I thought that's the dumbest thing in the world. I still do.
Yeah.
You couldn't get me to go up in that damn thing.
Really?
Really?
The radar stuff became important also later on in your career. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, about what you did with the early radar equipment in the Navy?
Well, in the Navy at VC-33, VC-33 did the night attack, and we had carried a crewman with us in the back, in the belly of the ADs, and they operated the radar, and we ended up being night fighter work in the Navy, and then later on I flew the AD-5 in, where it was side by side with the radar operator operated the radar, and I did a lot of radar work, and that actually helped me get the job with Raytheon. I really wasn't anything different than any of the other pilots. I just think George Botcher at Raytheon, who was my boss, who was an ex-Navy pilot, and in fact he had the Navy Cross from the Battle of Coral Sea through TVDs. He went and looked. He went back down to Atlantic City and interviewed, talked to my skipper, and they checked me out and all that bit. And I obviously didn't do anything so bad that I couldn't have got hired, so I got hired. But I really didn't do anything really that exceptional, but it was just enough in VC-33, I think, that helped me get the job.
Test pilot at Raytheon.
Well, I did some transportation work too, so I did fly. We had a Apache, and then they rented a twin Cessna 310. And then in the test work, I got to fly an F-86F, which was bailed to the Army. And that was one of the few Air Force planes I flew. And they had a B-26. It was actually an A-26 that was later, they changed to call it a Douglas Invader. And Raytheon had used it as a test bed, and I got to I really liked to fly that. I got checked out in that right away. And I really liked that B-26. And then later, Raytheon got an on-mark conversion B-26 that they used for passenger work, and I got to fly it too. And I got one ride in an F-8U, a Crusader, and I did an awful lot of work in the Douglas F-4D Skyray. The Douglas F-4D Skyray is the last jet I flew, and I was working at Holloman Air Force Base, TDY, with Raytheon at Holloman Air Force Base, doing a night project and also a day high altitude project. Both were at 50,000 feet. And that's where I was when, as a matter of fact, when Air America, when CAT called me. And I was there and working at Holloman when I got a telegram saying, if you are interested in work in Southeast Asia, give me a call at this number, signed H.H. Dawson. And
how did they know to send you a telegram?
Well, I had found out from a fellow by the name Art McNay, who was a Air Force pilot at Bedford, Hanscom Field, and he was in the service, and as a matter of fact, he checked me out in the F-86. I mean, you know, you got in it and flew, but he and I went up together the same day. Well, we became friends, and he happened to mention to me about this civil air transport. Well, I had heard about CAT, but a little bit being something to do with the Flying Tigers. And I don't know what happened, but in the early 60s, for one reason or another, I had sent a application. I don't remember exactly how it happened, but I got an application from CAT, and I sent it back, and it had all these planes like Dorniers and flying boats and all that. And of course, I hadn't flown anything that was on that sheet, but I told them about myself, and that they asked. I'd had a high clearance because I had done some special weapons work in VC-33, so I had a Q clearance or top secret clearance for special weapons, and that was it, and I'd sent that in before. And I guess that's how, I guess that's when in April of '65 I got this telegram. And I called the man and told him, I said, Mr. Dawson, I said, I can't, I'd sure like to know what's going on, but I can't come to Washington. I'm in the middle of a project, and told him a little bit about it, what I could. And he said, well, call me back. So I did. And I talked to him 30 minutes, and he hired me over the phone. And I talked to my wife about it, and got all, they said they had schools and everything. So that's how I got hired, over the phone while I was at. And then that was in April, and the project finished up, and I ended up going back to Bedford, and I found out that FBI or somebody had been around asking questions about me. In fact, in New Orleans, I heard the same thing. So I guess they checked on me, and I went to work for them. That's how I found out about it.
And before we get into lobster.
Oh yes. Well, Raytheon, of course, had quite a crew at White Sands, and all these were New Englanders, and they went out there because we fired the Hawk missiles at White Sands Proving Grounds in those days. Well, we had an F-3D, and it was wired to act as a missile. So instead of having to shoot a missile, well, we flew the F-3D by, and the radar would pick it up and track onto targets, and that's the way they did that work. Well, I had to go out there with a crewman. And this was like in June or maybe July of '56, and it was warm. Well, they wanted some lobsters. Well, Logan Airport had this back in '56, had a store that sold lobsters, and you've probably seen them, the great big aquarium type deal, and they were big ones. And so I got a couple 100 pounds of lobsters and brought them back in the Bonanza before I left, and we put them with seaweed in the both F-3D ammo boxes instead of the rounds. Right? We stuck all these lobsters in the ammo boxes. Well, we took off, and our first stop was in St. Louis, at Lambert. And so I took them up to 30,000, 35, whatever, 34,000, flew to St. Louis, and about 2 hours later we landed, gassed up, and took off again where it was warm, took them up to where it was below freezing. Of course, it's not pressurized, there's no heat in the wing or anything. And then finally got out to El Paso, where we landed. And they met me, and the folks there were glad to see me. They were more glad to see the lobsters. So they took the lobsters, and I understand about 3 days later, they all enjoyed them for supper. They were all living. It was amazing. And so that was the lobster flight. I think there were others that were hired over the phone, but he understood that I couldn't leave the project because that project was nearing completion. Yes, that's correct.
And plane tickets to fly over?
Oh, yes, they were fantastic, everything. I mean, I had brochures about Saigon and places I never heard of, Vientiane and Tachikawi, and they were, it was very, I mean, it was detailed, talking about if there was hot water and you had to use Clorox for the veggies, and some of it was, what am I getting into type thing. And also, I had tickets, first class tickets on Pan Am, and I had, the only thing they didn't do for me was take my shots. They got me a pass, everything. And that $50 to go, and everything was perfect. And I left on the 1st of July, 1965, and flew to Tokyo. And I remember we went up by Anchorage. I think we stopped at Anchorage from Los Angeles. And I remember it was late at night, but it was still daylight up there. And we couldn't take off because there were deer or moose on the runway. I remember that. And it was in a 707. And we flew to Hawaii, and then from there to Tokyo, and landed, I guess, the next day. We lost a day. And there was a CAT representative to meet me there at Tokyo. We stayed the night, first class treatment. Then the next day we got on the Catbird, the beautiful not Air America, the Civil Air Transport. At that time it was a Convair. And yes, it was an 880. It was beautiful, and the captain up front, I went up, we had first class treatment, And I remember I went up front, and I think the pilot was Felix Smith, and we landed in Taipei, and they met us and put us up in the finest hotel, the Mandarin, and that's how that got started. And then I got assigned the chief pilot, who was on home leave, Teeters, Don Teeters, I think. He was on home leave, so the other gent, I think his name was Hugh Hicks, assigned me to Saigon to fly SNBs, Twin Beaches.
Training or
No,
checkout?
there was the one thing I did do is they showed us around in the CAT building, and I ended up seeing a large ops board where they had apparently they tracked all the operations in all the bases. And another thing is I had like a security where I signed some sort of a security form where in some events if that it was possible that I could be disavowed. Of course, I had really no idea what I was getting into. I had no idea hardly about anything, but that was no problem.
Were there any other new hires that were with you? In your
Yes,
career?
Gene Huey came over with me. Gene was a retired Air Force colonel, and he had flown B-36s. And there was another gent, a Texan, a big, tall Texan, I remember, who I met. I can't remember his name. And he was assigned to fly the Helio Courier, which was a single-engine STOL plane, short takeoff and landing plane. And he was assigned Vientiane, and he said, "I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that." And he left and went back to the States. But Gene stayed, of course. In fact, Gene and I ended up seeing him later on in my career. But he went to either Vientiane or Udorn, I think one or the other right away. And whereas I was sent down to Saigon. First they sent me to Bangkok for ground school.
And check you out in the Twin Beach, the C-45?
No, I had no idea what, they didn't tell me I was going to be flying Twin Beaches. They just, anyway, said you'll be going to Saigon. But I'm jumping ahead of the story. I think the reason why is because I had flown the Twin Beach in the Navy. I had checked out as a instrument instructor and got a green card and went through all-weather flight. And then at Raytheon, I'd flown the Twin Beach quite a bit. They had a D-18S, so I knew how to fly the Twin Beach. But when I went to Bangkok, we went through ground school there on Pat Pong Road, the CAT building, across from Max's Bar, that everybody knows about. And I went through, the Apache, a Dornier, German, let's see, the Twin Beaches I mentioned, and that was about it. An Apache, yes, I mentioned that. So I really didn't know what I was going to fly.
Did they hire you as a captain?
Oh no, I started out as a $650 a month co-pilot, and I arrived in Saigon, I think, on the 16th, the night of the 16th. The funny thing is, as we were landing in Saigon, it was just at dark, and I looked out and saw an Air Force B-45 making a strafing run right next to the plane. I said, "Whoa!" And nobody met me in Saigon. That was the thing. Now I'm on my own. It's dark, and I check in, and man, I don't know where I am. All I know is I'm in the middle of something here. And I got a taxi cab, and I didn't know what to do, where to go. I said, well, I'll go downtown, find a place to stay, and find out where this Air America is. And I'm in the taxi, and on the way out, we're driving right out of Tansanut, and I look over and I see a C-46, and it's got Air America written on it. And I said, stop. And I got it, gave him his piastres or whatever. I got out with my 2 bags, and I went to the guard gate, and I talked my way in and walked through the airplanes into operations, and I really entered in the back doorway, and that's how they were too busy then. Things were different when you got out in the field.